paradrama tales. She promised she'd be gone just a few hours, a simple lunch with friends. But 4 days later, I was still there, terrified, exhausted, and alone with 2 tiny children. I thought I was doing the right thing. Instead, I realized how easily trust can be broken. When my sister first called me, I could hear the desperation in her voice. She needed someone to watch her 2 kids, her energetic 2-year-old and her tiny newborn, for just a few hours while she went to have lunch with some friends. She promised me it would be quick, nothing complicated, and she would be back before I even had a chance to miss my study time. At first, I said no, firmly. I was in the middle of prepping for my exams, and every hour counted. I explained how nervous I was, how I had no real experience with newborns, how terrified I was that something could go wrong. But the more I said no, the harder she pushed. She cried on the phone, begging me, saying she never asked me for anything, that she just needed this one break. She sounded so overwhelmed, so tired, that part of me, the part that always wanted to help my family, caved. Against my better judgment, I said yes. Even as I hung up the phone, a pit formed in my stomach. I tried to tell myself it would be fine. Just a few hours. I packed my books and notes, thinking maybe I could sneak in some studying while the kids napped. I told myself I was being dramatic, that it was normal to feel a little anxious when you were taking care of children for the first time. When I arrived, she was already halfway out the door. She kissed the kids goodbye to her purse and with a rushed, "Thank you, you're a lifesaver." She was gone. I barely had time to ask any last-minute questions before the door shut behind her. The house felt too big, too quiet, and too heavy all at once. The newborn started crying almost immediately, and the toddler, sensing the shift, began pulling on my hand and asking for snacks. I was overwhelmed within minutes, but I pushed through. After all, it was just a few hours. I could do anything for a few hours. I kept glancing at the clock, counting down the minutes until she would be back. Afternoon turned into evening. Evening bled into night. I fed them, I changed diapers. I tried to keep the toddler entertained. I didn't sleep much that night, too terrified something might happen to the baby on my watch. Still, I told myself she'll be back in the morning. But the morning came, and then the afternoon. And still no word, no texts, no calls. I started to panic. Was she hurt? In a hospital? Did something terrible happen? I called her phone over and over, each call going to voicemail. I called hospitals. I checked local news. I was genuinely scared she might be missing. Or worse. What was supposed to be a few hours was rapidly turning into a nightmare I hadn't signed up for. I wasn't just babysitting anymore. I was surviving, barely holding it together, trying to protect 2 tiny lives while feeling more and more abandoned myself. And somewhere deep inside me, a small, painful realization began to grow. This wasn't just about her needing help. It was about her leaving because she knew I'd be too afraid, or too guilty, to walk away. That first night, I barely slept. Every tiny noise from the newborn's bassinet jolted me awake. Every toss and turn from the toddler sleeping fitfully on the couch made my heart race. I kept the baby monitor clutched in my hand like it was a lifeline, even though I was never more than a few feet away. I kept telling myself that she would come back in the morning. That maybe her phone had died, maybe she had stayed out too late and crashed at a friend's house. I held on to any excuse that could explain why she hadn't answered my calls, why she had left me completely alone with 2 tiny human beings depending on me. But when morning came and went, the reality started to sink in. By lunchtime, the toddler was asking for mommy. I didn't know what to say. I plastered on a fake smile and distracted him with crackers and cartoons, while inside I was breaking apart. My anxiety was clawing at my chest, tightening until it hurt to breathe. Every passing hour felt heavier, stretching time into something unbearable. I was terrified, not just for the kids, but for her too. Where was she okay? I called again and again. Voicemail. I started calling the local hospitals. I described her height, her hair color, what she had been wearing when I last saw her. Each receptionist kindly checked, but the answer was always the same. No one matching that description had been admitted. I even debated calling the police. I was that scared. I was 18 years old, trying to be strong for 2 little lives while silently falling apart inside. Meanwhile, I was juggling bottles, diapers, tantrums, and feedings. I was running on fumes, operating purely on adrenaline. I didn't even have time to study for my exams anymore. My textbooks sat untouched on the kitchen counter, collecting dust as I rocked a screaming newborn at 2 in the morning. By the second day, I had stopped lying to myself. This wasn't a misunderstanding. She hadn't lost her phone. She hadn't gotten stranded somewhere. She had left, voluntarily, and whatever she was doing, it was clearly more important than coming home to her children, or even letting me know she was alive. That realization hit harder than any exhaustion or fear I had been carrying. I was scared, yes. But more than anything, I felt betrayed. Betrayed that she had manipulated me into staying, into sacrificing my time, my health, my mental well-being, without even the basic decency to keep her word. I began counting the hours not by daylight or darkness, but by bottles prepared, diapers changed, and desperate, unanswered calls. From afternoon to nightmare, that's what it became. A slow, aching transformation where every shred of trust I had in her withered away, replaced by fear, anger, and a deep, atching sadness that she didn't even care enough to check in. And still, I stayed. I stayed because those kids had no one else in that moment. And if there was anything I knew for certain, it was that I wasn't going to abandon them the way she had abandoned all of us. By the third day, my anxiety wasn't just simmering. It was boiling over. Every vibration of my phone, every creak of the house, sent my heart racing. I lived in a constant state of high alert, waiting for a text, a call, anything that would tell me she was okay, that I was okay. But every time I picked up the phone, there nothing. No missed calls. No new messages. Just silence. The silence was the worst part. It wasn't just that I was tired or scared or overwhelmed. It was that I had been completely abandoned without even a shred of explanation. I found myself checking the doors twice, 3 times, making sure they were locked. I peeked out the window every few minutes like I was expecting her to pull into the driveway. But she never did. I started calling more hospitals. I called police non-emergency lines. I even checked social media to see if anyone had posted anything. A party, an accident, anything that could explain where she was. I imagined the worst: a car accident, a hospital bed, a missing persons report. My mind created nightmare after nightmare, each one more terrifying than the last. And meanwhile, the kids needed me. They needed bottles, diaper changes, hugs. The toddler kept asking, "Where's Mommy?" over and over again, each time like a knife twisting deeper into my chest. I didn't know how to answer him. I didn't know if I should lie to protect him, or if the truth, that I had no idea where his mother was, would be more cruel. I did what I could. I sang lullabies even though my throat was raw from crying. I kept routines as normal as possible even though nothing about this was normal. Every time I changed a diaper or made a bottle, I told myself, just get through this next 5 minutes. That was all I could manage, 5 minutes at a time. The newborn sensed the tension too. Babies can tell when something's wrong. His little body was fussy and restless no matter what I did. I held him against my chest, rocking him, trying to convince both of us that it was going to be okay. Inside, though, I was unraveling. Panic attacks started coming in waves. My hands would tremble uncontrollably. My chest would tighten until it felt like I couldn't breathe. More than once, I sat on the floor between the bassinet and the couch, crying silently, trying not to scare the kids. Why wasn't she answering? Why wasn't she coming home? I didn't know which was worse. The idea that something terrible had happened to her, or the growing suspicion that she had simply chosen not to come back. That she had decided, consciously, that her need to escape was more important than her children, than me, than any promise she had made. When you love someone, you want to believe the best about them. You want to believe that if they don't call, there's a good reason. That if they don't come home, it's because something stopped them, not because they simply didn't care. But as the minutes stretched into hours, and the hours into days, I realized that sometimes the people you trust the most are the ones who hurt you the deepest, and all the unanswered calls in the world wouldn't change that. By the time she finally walked through the door, I was past fear, past anger. I was numb. It was late in the evening, and I had just gotten the toddler settled down after yet another round of "We're Here's Mommy." I heard the door unlock, and for a split second my heart surged. Relief, panic, disbelief all tangled into one sharp breath. There she was, standing in the doorway, sunglasses pushed up on her head, holding her phone like nothing the world was wrong. No limp, no bruises, no signs of an accident or tragedy, just casual, like she had stepped out to grab coffee and forgotten what time it was. I stared at her, waiting for some explanation, something that made the last 4 days make sense. Instead, she just laughed lightly and tossed her bag onto the counter. "Relax," she said breezily, waving off my frozen expression. "Their kids are fine. You're fine. Stop being so dramatic." I couldn't even find words. My hands were trembling, spinning with exhaustion and disbelief. Finally, I managed to whisper, "Fear were you?" She shrugged. "Partying, mostly. I lost track of time. 4 days. 2 little kids depending on me. My own life and sanity crumbling." And her answer was that she lost track of time. The worst part wasn't even the partying itself. It was the way she looked at me, like I was crazy for being upset. Like I was the one overreacting. Like she had done me a favor by letting me play house for 4 days straight without so much as a warning. "I mean, you're fine, right?" she said again, dropping onto the couch. "The kids are fine, you're still breathing. So what's the big deal?" I opened my mouth, desperate to say something, anything that would make her understand. But the words got stuck in my throat. How do you explain to someone that it's not just about survival, that it's about trust, about the crushing fear of thinking someone you love might be dead? I had spent sleepless nights panicking, calling hospitals, imagining the worst. I had sacrificed my own mental health, my exam prep, my sense of safety, all because she had begged me for just a few hours. And she hadn't even had the decency to send a single text. And now she was telling me to calm down, like none of it mattered. When I tried to tell her how terrified I'd been, how serious it all felt, she rolled her eyes and told me to shut the fifik up because she was tired and trying to sleep. That was the moment something inside me snapped. I realized right then that no apology was coming, no understanding, no recognition of the sheer weight she had dumped on my shoulders without a second thought. She didn't care. She had never cared. I gathered my things quietly, feeling like a ghost in my own skin. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was just empty. Empty and done. As I closed the door behind me, the only thought running through my mind was crystal clear. I deserved better than this. When I heard the words come out of her mouth, "Shut the few up. I'm trying to sleep." It felt like time froze. I stood there, my bag half packed. My body trembling not from fear anymore, but from something sharper, something colder clarity. This was who she really was. Not the sister who had cried and begged for help. Not the sister who had promised she'd only be gone a few hours. The person sitting there on the couch, dismissing my fear and pain like it was some inconvenient background noise. That was the real her. I stared at her, stunned, watching as she pulled a blanket over herself without even sparing a second glance in my direction. The exhaustion, the panic, the helplessness that had been building inside me for days boiled up into something I couldn't ignore anymore. I realized then that it didn't matter how much I loved her. It didn't matter that she was family. Family doesn't treat you like you're disposable. I finished packing my things in silence. Every shove of a textbook, every fold of a sweater felt like I was reclaiming a piece of myself she had carelessly trampled over. I didn't rush. I didn't cry. There was no dramatic shouting match, no slamming doors. There was just a heavy, aching finality. The toddler stirred from his nap, and I felt a pang in my chest, guilt creeping in. He hadn't asked for any of this. Neither had the newborn. They were innocent. They deserved better too. But I knew I couldn't stay. Not for them, not for anyone. If it meant losing myself completely. As I zipped up my bag and slung it over my shoulder, she mumbled something under her breath about me being ungrateful. I didn't even flinch. There was nothing left to say. I walked out of that house with my head high, even as my heart broke a little with each step. I had done more than what was asked of me. I had stayed when she disappeared. I had fed, changed, comforted, and protected her children when she had chosen to abandon them for a party. And in return, she had offered me nothing but contempt. I wasn't running away. I was saving myself. On the train ride home, my phone buzzed. I almost didn't look, but curiosity won out. It was her, calling, texting, demanding to know how dare I leave before her hospital appointment on Saturday, reminding me that I had promised, that I had obligations. But I knew better now. Promises made under manipulation are not promises that deserve to be kept, especially not when keeping them costs you your mental health, your dignity, and your self-respect. I put my phone on silent and stared out the window. The trees blurred past, the sun setting slowly over the horizon, and for the first time in days, I felt something close to peace. Leaving wasn't betrayal. Leaving was survival. It didn't take long after I left for the guilt trip to start. My phone vibrated non-stop with a string of angry texts and missed calls. First, it was confusion. Where are you? Then frustration. You can't just leave like that. And finally, the dagger she knew would hurt most. You herein, you'd watch them Saturday while I went to the hospital. How could you abandon us? There it was, the classic move. Twist my words, weaponize my kindness, and turn it into a noose around my neck. And for a moment, I'll be honest, I hesitated. Because yes, technically, I had promised to help her with the toddler during her newborn's hospital appointment. I remembered that conversation clearly. Back when I thought she was still someone I could trust, back when she hadn't disappeared for 4 days with no warning, leaving me drowning in fear and exhaustion. But promises are built on trust, and trust has to be a two-way street. How could I be expected to honor a commitment made under the assumption that basic respect and decency would be returned? She broke our agreement the second she chose to vanish without a word. The moment she prioritized partying over her own children and meat. Any promises I had made became void. I owed her nothing anymore except the respect I owed myself. Still, guilt clung to me like a second skin. I thought about that sweet toddler, his chubby hands reaching up for me, asking for his mommy. I thought about the tiny newborn wriggling helplessly in his bassinet. It wasn't their fault. They hadn't asked for this mess. And that was the hardest part, separating my love for the kids from the toxic expectations their mother kept piling onto me. But as the train rumbled forward, carrying me further from her house and closer to my own life, I forced myself to take a deep breath and see the situation for what it really was. She wasn't upset because I broke a promise. She was upset because she lost her free babysitter. She was upset because for once someone told her no. That realization was liberating and heartbreaking at the same time. I wasn't abandoning them. I was rescuing myself from a cycle that would never end if I didn't find the strength to break it now. She could scream in rage and guilt trip all she wanted. But I had given her every chance. I had gone above and beyond for her, and when I needed even the smallest ounce of appreciation, she gave me nothing but contempt. This wasn't about Saturday. This was about every Saturday that would come after. Every time she would expect me to clean up her messes while she lived her life without consequences. And I knew, deep down, if I didn't say no now, I might never find the courage to say no again. So I silenced my phone, leaned back against the train seat, and let the weight of the guilt slip. Not completely, but enough to breathe. Enough to remember that setting boundaries doesn't make you cruel. It makes you free. I hadn't even gotten home yet when my phone buzzed again. This time it was my mom. At first, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe she had heard what happened and was calling to tell me she was proud of me for standing up for myself. Maybe she would understand. But the moment I answered, I knew better. Her voice was sharp, clipped with disapproval. "I heard you left your sister stranded," she said without even a hello. I tried to explain, tried to tell her everything. How my sister had promised to be gone for just a few hours. How I had cared for the kids completely alone for 4 days without sleep. How I had genuinely feared for her life. I told her about the unanswered calls, the panic attacks, the moment I realized she had been partying the entire time. But my mom didn't hear any of that. Or maybe she didn't want to. "You should have stayed one more day," she said. "You knew she had an appointment for the baby on Saturday. You could have been patient. It's family. We sacrifice for family." Those words hit harder than I expected, because somewhere deep down part of me still wanted her to say, "You did the right thing." Instead, I felt like I was being painted as selfish, dramatic, disloyal, all for choosing to protect myself. I gripped the phone tighter, feeling anger rise beneath the hurt. Was I supposed to sacrifice myself indefinitely? Was I supposed to stay and endure panic attacks, sleepless nights, neglect, and disrespect, all for the sake of family? And yet, as much as I wanted to shout back, to defend myself, I stayed quiet. I realized something as she spoke of my mother saw sacrifice as love, no matter how damaging it was. In her eyes, enduring mistreatment wasn't just expected, it was noble. But I was tired of carrying burdens that weren't mine to bear. I had spent my whole life believing that love meant setting yourself on fire to keep other people warm. But now I was starting to understand. Real love doesn't demand that you destroy yourself for someone else's comfort. I told my mom, calmly but firmly, that I wasn't staying in a situation where I was treated like a convenience, where my fear and suffering were dismissed like background noise. "I can love my family," I said, "and still choose to protect myself." There was silence on the line, heavy, disappointed silence. And even though it hurt, even though I felt that old familiar ache of wanting to please her, wanting to be seen as good, I knew I had made the right choice. Sometimes protecting your peace means disappointing the people who expect you to keep bleeding for them. And I was finally learning that my well-being wasn't selfish. It was necessary. The train rumbled beneath me, steady and certain, as if carrying me away from the chaos of the last 4 days and into something I hadn't dared to choose before it myself. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't moving according to someone else's needs, someone else's guilt trips, or someone else's emergencies. I was moving for me. It wasn't an easy decision. Walking away never is, not when it's family. Every mile the train carried me further from my sister's house. A small part of me ached with guilt. I thought about the toddler's laugh, the soft sighs of the newborn as he slept on my chest, the moments that made me feel needed, valued. It would have been so easy to stay for them. But staying would have meant abandoning myself. I thought about the way my hands had trembled from panic, the exhaustion that left me dizzy and hollow, the desperate phone calls unanswered. I thought about her laughing in my face, telling me to shut up when I tried to explain the pain I was carrying. I thought about how easy it had been for her to disappear. Not just from her kids, but from me, as if my fear, my time, my health meant absolutely nothing. And I realized something I should have understood long ago. You cannot save someone who does not want to be saved. You cannot help someone who sees your help as their right, your exhaustion as their inconvenience. I didn't leave because I stopped loving them. I left because I finally loved myself enough to say, "This is not okay. A family doesn't give anyone the right to exploit your kindness. Love doesn't mean accepting disrespect, abandonment, or being used until there's nothing left of you. Real love, is built on respect, on care, on mutual sacrifice. Not one person giving everything while the other takes without thought. As the landscape blurred past the window, I let the weight of all of it settle into my chest. The anger, the sadness, the mourning of what I thought we had, and the acceptance of what we truly did. I wasn't running away. I was choosing peace over chaos. I was choosing health over guilt. I was choosing myself finally without apology. When my phone buzzed again with another text from my sister, I didn't even look. I simply turned it on the seat beside me and watched the sun sink lower across the horizon, painting the sky in colors I hadn't noticed in days. I was tired. I was hurting. But for the first time in a long time, I knew I was doing something right. I wasn't abandoning anyone. I was saving the one person I had neglected for too long, me. Saying no to someone you love might be one of the hardest things you'll ever do. It feels unnatural, almost cruel at first, like you're breaking some unspoken rule about loyalty and family. But what I've learned through this painful experience is simple and powerful. You are not a bad person for saying no. You are not heartless for setting boundaries. You are not selfish for protecting your peace. You are not cruel for refusing to stay in a situation that is slowly tearing you apart. I didn't walk away because I stopped loving my family. I walked away because love without respect is not love at all. Because being there for someone shouldn't come at the cost of your own mental health, your safety, your dignity. Too often, we are taught that sacrifice is the ultimate proof of love. That giving until you have nothing left makes you good. But the truth is, you are allowed to say no when someone takes more than they give. You are allowed to walk away when staying means losing pieces of yourself you may never get back. Leaving doesn't mean you failed. It means you recognized your worth. And if someone, even someone you love, cannot respect that worth, they don't get unlimited access to your life, your heart, or your time. If you are facing a similar situation right now, whether with family, friends, or anyone who makes you feel like your pain is a burden, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not wrong for choosing yourself. Protecting your heart is not betrayal. It is bravery. If you've ever had to walk away from someone for the sake of your own peace, share your story in the comments. Your journey matters. And it might just be the reminder someone else needs today. If this story spoke to you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for more real stories about healing, self-respect, and standing tall even when it's hard. You are stronger than you think, and you deserve a life where your heart feels safe. Without apology,